guys, welcome to Clockwork Noodles, the channel which looks at everything that is related to noodle products, and we are looking at all things anime. So we spent the full 2020 breaking down the 5 animes I chose to talk to you guys about, Noblesse being one of them. Noblesse is ending us, so it's taken us out of the season and the year now, so it's the final episode I will have for fall 2020. I am working on a project which hopefully you guys will appreciate, and it is related to anime, so you might see these characters come back up at some point, but I'm just still working on the bits and ins and outs of it. So if you want to stay tuned for that, make sure you guys are subscribed. Winter 2021 is very fast approaching. We've got the first few animes kicking off on the 4th and 5th of January. My first video will be The Promised Neverland on the 7th of January. Make sure you guys are subscribed and make sure you continue your amazing support that you have done, and I will hopefully keep getting better and better at what it is I do, making these breakdowns a bit more entertaining, a bit more in depth when it comes to it. The Promised Neverland, I think, will definitely be one where I need to be breaking down a little bit differently anyway, so it's going to be a challenge, that anime, and I can't wait for it. I really can't. So I really hope you guys can come across and join me for one of the animes I'm watching. The video is up on the channel for you guys to see what animes I am breaking down. I might even link to it in the bottom here, just so you guys know what I am actually watching this coming season. Also, hopefully you guys had a great Christmas and that 2021 is going to be kind to all of us, hopefully a lot kinder than this year was. I will wish you guys now a happy 2021, because by the time I next put a video up, it will be 2021. So thank you guys so much. There is indeed a Discord channel for you guys to go ahead and give that a like. You get a notification whenever a video goes up on a channel. You might have noticed during the quiet period between the seasons swapping over, I have been doing some game releases. It's not a permanent fixture on the channel. It's just something to keep the channel ticking over with releases. Essentially have a bit of fun. I think we had Long Live the Queen, which was slightly related to anime, so I figured that would be fun to watch. And plus, you get to see me die a lot at games. That is the fun part. But we are not a gaming channel. We are indeed an anime channel. So let's talk about the final episode of Noblesse. This is episode 13, our end. The title indeed was Noblesse / Take Her Hand, where we open in a recap of last week where Raz did actually walk in on time. They decided to troll me and have Raz walk into an empty room. It kind of gave him that Zorro from One Piece kind of feel, where he's useless without a map, which I kind of like. It's a nice little touch to Raz because he's been developed as a character, but he hasn't got any like quirks, and that's the first quirk we've seen with him being quite bad at knowing what room. And plus, this place looks huge, so I can't blame him for that too much. On Rasgria, who informs Raz, because they're now finally face to face, that anybody who is associated with him is also a criminal, where Gajutal really is my OP for this episode. I adore Gajutal's character. I think he really is a great character, and it's nice to see his story finally get explained this episode as well, where he asks one last wish, a wish of Raz. Obviously, he says it's the dying wish of me, that you must take care of them. And this is him going out of a noble cause. That is a noble thing to wish. Regardless of the fact that he's been put to death, he is still able to say, you need to take care of them, please do this. It's a noble wish. If anything, this anime try to explore what it means to be noble. What does that word hold, and what it means to be noble and act noble, which I quite like. Where we see Raz actually refusing to let anybody die, which is probably why I really like the guy, that he's quite passive, and even the way he fights this episode is very passive. He is then confronted by someone named Keiru, I believe is how you pronounce that. He comes in for an attack straight away because obviously he believes he's protecting his lord, where we see that the attack does absolutely nothing. He can't lay a finger on him. He swipes at him. Raz is just kind of like, okay, cool. And he pushes him back, and it's quite a nice offensive move, where everything Raz does this episode is pretty passive, even though we even see him call out a blood field and everything. But everything he does is not with the intention to hurt anybody, so he's not physically attacking anyone. He's basically defending himself and being offensive, which is also another little character I like about him, which is why I never believed that he killed anybody. And it's great to see that's finally addressed this episode too. We get to see Rosario versus Mr Hansen. He's not Franken or Carius, I'm sorry, but I know there's Raz fangirls out there, so you can have your moment with Mr Hansen. He simply just kind of reflects her attack, and she gets actually pushed back and knocked out by her own attack, so he doesn't even bother attacking her. We are introduced to a guy called Ludus, who we also find out is in charge of protection. So a lot of his skills, which is quite nice. We see him using quite defensive skills. All of his attacks are defensive, so he can summon quite a few little handy shields, which is quite handy to see that not all of these powers are just attacking powers. They are defensive in nature as well, which is quite nice. We see Raz using his mind control to get the three to stand down. We also get a nice little moment with Sierra and Gajuto. Sierra says, isn't it just the Lord who has that kind of power? Where Gajuto tells us as well that the Noblesse is also a power who is greater than the Lord. The Noblesse's duty is to protect the Lord. We finally see Rasgria telling them to kind of stand down together, you stand no chance against him, which does beg the question, and you guys know I don't like her, and I'm sorry. Even after this episode, I don't like her, I'm sorry. It does beg the question, why, if you knew these guys didn't stand a chance against him, why did you just not straight out go, don't do it? Spare them the humiliation of having their asses whooped by Raz. We didn't even need to have that little moment there, because she knew that they didn't stand a chance, and she could have told them that. Of course, you guys know that Carius, last episode, he took on the ranks of becoming one of my boys. He is still my boy in this episode. I adore what he does a bit later on down the line. We see him picking up the collapsed Regis, and everybody who is now outside comes inside because they can sense the power starting to rise, because Rasgria is starting to use those powers. Well, we get our Raz versus Rasgria fight. Not overly impressed with the fight. Raz is unaffected still. I mean, he's able to knock her back, and then we see that she tries to do it herself. She refuses to take anybody's help, where he finally asks the question, like, what are you afraid of? He even says that your powers should be the same as mine. We are kind of led to believe that Rasgria is holding her powers back because she doesn't want to hurt anybody, or anybody in the room is also going to get affected, but this does end up triggering her to finally unleash a full-blown attack anyway, and it is the same power as we've known before, is blood-filled, because Raz even said, you've got the same powers as mine. So we saw Raz, I think, doing the blood-filled way back in episode 3 or 4. However, leaves Raz completely unaffected. Rasgria is just so shocked, she drops to the floor and she drops the sword, and I'm just not impressed with her, because you knew this. She clearly knew that he had a very, very high power level. She even called off all three of them. She was like, stand down, you don't stand a chance together. You're holding back and you're just treating him like a coward, so you're underestimating who you're up against. It's not a very noble thing to do, and I think that's why I like the Kershaw clan quite a bit. I think I've done that right. Because they treated Franklin, they didn't look down on him, they didn't underjudge him or anything. They were like, okay, we're going to give you what you deserve. And they called forth their soul weapons, and they took him on equally. They saw their attacker as an equal, which is probably why I like that clan quite a bit, just because of the way they don't underestimate anybody, which is what Rasgria essentially does. She kind of believes that she's better than him, and she kind of goes into it without even thinking. And it really does all come back to what I initially mentioned. It's that because of the Lord not actually spending time with her, not acknowledging her, not even just spending time just to talk to her and explain, the jealousy, the loneliness, the inferiority to being compared to someone like Raz, and not even hearing the end of that sentence and nobody actually standing by to talk to her, has led us to this. There is nothing more to it. There is this. What I was worried was it was going to be this, and it is this, because there was no hidden secret. Raz never killed nobody. Thankfully, we will get that explained, but it does all come back down to the Lord maybe he hasn't planned to do it, but thanks to his actions, he's actually put Raz in quite a bad position because she hates him, and obviously there is that rumour going around, but even without that rumour, she was not Raz's fan. She didn't like Raz because Raz was being offered the thing that she wanted the most. We do see that all the nobles in the room are technically with her, and Raz even tells them that, it's pointless. Rasgria can't actually hurt me until she learns to manage her skills. But regardless of this, it's amazing to see them rallying together to protect her, but they have been told it's pointless and you're just wasting your efforts. He's not even attacking. So they basically try and attack a target who isn't really posing a threat. Raz is just standing there. He's not doing anything. He's not coming at them with anything. And I felt like this was quite unnoble of the four who did this. And sure, they believe they're protecting the Lord, but the Lord is fine. She's on the floor taking in a moment, guys. And you're rushing again, even despite being told even by the Lord that you can't do it together. They even said, we're not going to let you attack a target who's down, but Raz wasn't doing anything either. We see Raz once again not even breaking a sweat. He takes on the 4 absolutely fine because we already knew he would be able to. Where Rasgria's still shocked as she's got Raz's words kind of spinning around her head. We see Raz start to approach and powering up a blood field to, as he says, end things. The fact that he summons a blood field shocks the 4, despite the fact that Raz even said that they had the same powers, which there's a lot of little things which kind of build up for me getting more and more annoyed in this episode than anything else. I think with all of the 3 that have been adapted to the anime form this year, this entire year has been the year of the manhwas, but none of them are perfect. And I'm a very big Tower of God fan, and I still can tell you I didn't like the adaptation. I'm going to try and hopefully explain myself a little bit later on, but just for now, I wasn't very impressed with any of this. Finally, seeing the blood field approaching her 4, Rasgria stands up and finally has the power to stand up and be a little bit more noble, to stand up to protect people, where she summons a blood field 2. We have blood field versus blood field. Blood field disappears. Raz ends up using too much of his powers, ends up fainting into our boy Franken. Rasgria kind of sinks to the floor, surrounded by her clan leaders, where Raz starts to produce Ragnarok. And we see there are 2 Ragnaroks. The 2 come together, and the previous Lord's spirit, they kind of say it's a fort left over, but they are soul weapons. I would expect these weapons to have a tiny fragment of the souls carried by their previous users, because I think, even if it's not the case, I feel like they're missing out on a trick there. A bit like My Hero Academia, where All Might's powers is one for all. It travels down the line of 7 different users, so it takes something of all those users, so whoever has it currently can see and has those abilities to borrow their powers and build on it. I feel like that's hopefully what I'm expecting the soul weapon to be similar to, that any of the previous leaders' souls are kind of imbued a little bit into the weapons. Where it's very similar to an answer phone message, because he even goes, if you're hearing this and seeing this, I must be dead. He addresses her, and finally, this is the final moment, but he really should have done this before maybe going to his eternal sleep. He finally talks to her and explains his decisions. He explains what led to ending his life, and he explains pretty much everything. It just could have been done. He could have saved her by actually talking to her before ending his life, where he says that nobles can opt to either live their long lives or they can live quite short lives. And then we get a little bit of a rundown to him talking about humans who live short lives, but regardless of them being bad, them being good, but they always manage to change, and they're always striving to get better and evolve. The Franken is that smart ass. When he says that, then a human who was a smart ass came along. That's Franken. You even see Franken kind of looking to the side, kind of like going, it wasn't me. He says, if there's a rule that you don't like, you just get rid of it. And that is what led the Lord to start thinking that the nobles aren't actually free. Despite the fact that they've got these powers, they're not free, and they too need to evolve. Where he started to share his idea with his own nobles, and he voluntarily said, I'm going to end my life, let the younger generation take over and essentially change things. But we do see that a lot of the older lords also follow to opt into that eternal sleep. Gajutal, our OP, who I adore, I love the character of Gajutal, was ordered to stay and keep an eye on everybody, ended up saying absolutely nothing to anybody. It's a bit of a double-edged sword that the Lord has kind of given him a job which isn't going to make him most popular. And due to the younger ruling class all suddenly taking up positions, maybe where they weren't ready for it, there was a huge confusion, and a rumour started to spread that Raz was indeed a traitor because they wanted to take advantage of the young lord and the fact that she probably wasn't ready for her role either. This ended up angering her, and she ended up, through her anger, she was able to unify all the nobles to stand together against a single cause. So Raz ended up being that one person. As much as he was a scapegoat, he gave them all a reason to join together, not fight amongst each other. Where Gajutal is my definition of noble. I know they say it's Regis in this, and Regis does take a few points, but it's Gajutal here who is still prepared to die for hiding the truth. Regardless of the fact I don't think he should die at all, I definitely think he was doing what he was told, but he was also doing it with everybody in mind, and he wasn't doing it out of harm or anything. He is still ready to die for hiding the truth. At the end of the day, he still wanted a unity regardless of what happened. And even when he was about to be killed, he even asks Raz still look after everybody. This is a noble act. So regardless of the fact that he would have been put to death unfairly in my eyes, he was still looking out for the greater good for everybody around him. He also just happily asks for his punishment. And that's what I think is noble if we're going to talk about what we've learned from Noblesse as a series. It's the idea of what it means to be noble. This next section is my favourite section for the entire episode. This face! Look at this face! Look at his face. It's Carius bursting through the doors, and he just flings Regis like he's a Pokemon, going, "Go, Regis!" And he flings him at the floor at his grandfather's feet. I like that. That was great. That broke the moment for me. Regis addresses the Lord, who states that the sin of the clan leader falls upon the entire clan. You must execute me as well, which is a very noble thing, that you share the burden of the sin. Then my boy Carius once more telling everybody that Regis is more noble than anybody here. If you start killing off the future leaders, you are indeed going to be sullying the name of the Lord. Which then starts to gain a bit more motion. We see, I think it's Rajak also coming in, who says that you can't kill the future, that you should spare Gajutal as well. You need to hear the wishes of the clan leader, and that's when he leads us into a joint bow. Rasgria finally coming forward towards Sierra and Gajutal, ends up removing the handcuffs, finally sees some sense, and actually thanks Gajutal for being there by her side when she was lonely, that she could never actually kill him despite her trying. Ragnarok joins together, and again we see our Lord stating that Raz, Gajutal, everybody is all by your side. They're doing the one thing that I never did. And he finally tells her that he loves her and he wishes her well. Where Ragnarok now joins to be one. Rasgria ends up taking her blade. And then that leads us into the end section where RK4, I love the chemistry between these two. I think, especially Regis and Silver and the entire RK4 group, I like the chemistry going on with these guys. There's a lot of chemistry where they bounce between each other. Like Regis and Silver, they start off, it starts light and then it turns into the fight once more where it's like, I'll kill you. And it's just that kind of relationship between them that they don't actually hate each other. You know they don't hate each other, but that their relationship is built over the fact that they play fight, and I like the fact that that is what it is. We also see our boy Franken coming in to tell everybody that we're going back to Japan, and Regis and Sierra too are allowed to return and continue their studies to become more well-rounded nobles. We get a moment now with Raz and Rasgria where she asks for his honest opinion on her father, which leads us finally into the second half of that scene, that fateful scene where we see the Lord offering lordship to Raz, where Raz actually asks the Lord, what about Rasgria? Because if she had stayed to listen, she might have actually noticed this as well, where he says that she's just a child and he wants Raz to be a model for her, so she can learn of him and become a better lord in the long run when she's ready. And he even says that being lord is tough, where I like the little remark where Raz is like, well, it doesn't look it, because obviously the Lord seems very carefree in his eyes. He's always inviting him to tea. And the Lord even tries to say being the Lord is better than being a noblesse, because you're never going to be truly alone. There's always going to be somebody around you, but you're forgetting one teeny tiny thing. Raz is Franken. Raz isn't alone. He's been living 5 years locked up in a castle with Franken. And even now, I think it's 800 years sleep, Franken's still with him. So he's not actually as alone as you think he is. And I called it. Raz simply flat out rejects it. He doesn't want to be the Lord. He has no interest in that. Where he says, I will continue to support you as O Noblesse. We finally return to the scene. Raz simply says he was a proud, doting father, ending that sequence on a high note. And our end credits start to roll. We see Raz deciding to head home and stating that one day the Noblesse may never actually be needed in the Lukedonia, because the Lord is surrounded by great noble leaders who can hopefully take that place instead, where they can support her. We do end up on a nice little line here where he says, when I get home, I want some ramen. Me too. Because of the state of the world, and I'm in the worst tier in the UK, I haven't had ramen since March, proper ramen since March, and it's been horrible. I miss ramen, so I am envious, and hopefully Raz does get to eat some ramen finally. We end up with our school reunion. We see everybody meeting up at the end, and that is the end note we go out on. So I've got to talk about this series as a whole. Obviously, I've tried to skip through the end episode quite quickly. There's a lot of little bits going on, but I decided to skip through so we could talk about the entire season as a whole. Hopefully I don't get too many people angry. It wasn't a bad adaptation. I'm not saying it is bad. I'm saying that there's a lot of potential. So please listen to me, guys. There is a lot of potential. There is a lot of room in the characters. There's a lot of very nice quirks. There's a lot of nice characters. All the characters felt unique. The backstory started to get developed, which is quite nice. Again, I don't like Rasgria. I still don't like the way that it all boiled down to that. The fact that she was going out of her way to kill people over, yes, a misunderstanding. I guess we can blame the previous Lord. My overall score is a 6.5. It is indeed the lowest of 5 I broke down, but it's because of how good the manhwa actually is. I have done myself now the favour, now that I've finished this season, to quickly just have a little look. I've not done anything more than flick through, looking at certain moments, just checking a few things out, and it just feels like there was a lot more. Obviously, you have to cut things down to make a series, but it just feels like they've cut out a lot. And to be fair, it's nowhere near as bad as how dirty they did the God of High School. That was done dirty. This, I don't think, was done as bad. But as I said before, I don't think any of the 3 manhwa adaptations we had this year have glowed. They haven't had a glowing response. They haven't been perfect. They haven't been great. Tower of God was passable, but there's a lot of cutting in that made it quite boring to visually watch. Noblesse at times just felt like it needed more. Like, you'd get really into it, we'd have a great build, we'd start building up to a fight, and the fight would be over in a matter of seconds, whilst the build had lasted like half an episode. I gave it a 6.5 on the fact that I think there are a lot of good things. Like I said, there's a few characters I really enjoyed. The story itself is good. The whole premise has a lot of potential, and we've seen things like this premise done in things like Underworld, and we've seen other franchises out there using the same idea, the same premise, all of those kind of things which deal with the idea of a noble race and things like vampires and things. I'm trying not to hammer down on the word vampire because they're not technically vampires, but they do use blood magic. Why it does so well as a manhwa and why it is one of the top, we can't knock the fact that it is one of the kings of manhwas, but it's got a very good premise, and the premise is interesting, and the idea of them being like nobles and having powers and watching over the humans, there's a lot of interesting things going on. Obviously there is the whole union thing going on, which wasn't really touched upon anymore in this season. I'm guessing that comes a lot later down the line, but there's a lot of things that they start to introduce us to, these ideas, but they don't come back. But the idea of the union modifying humans, and we've got this whole backstory with Silver going on, or as you guys call him, M21. I still stand by the fact that I wanted to give him a proper name because I didn't like calling him just an experiment name. So some of you guys are actually quite nice about that, so I didn't get too much of a hammering there. I know a few people in other animes don't like it when I give nicknames. It's just one which really fitted in that sense. It's been interesting to watch it. It's been an interesting wrap up. I wasn't overly keen on the way they wrapped it up, but those are all down to little things, my opinions kind of thing. So you guys who have been more introduced to the manhwa as a whole, and you guys have read the manhwa, so you guys it's probably going to be a little bit different. You'll have different opinions on how you think this episode went. But overall, I mean, it's been interesting to see Noblesse hit the screen. A few years since I saw The Awakening. I liked Awakening. I definitely remember liking it and actually stating that I really wanted to see some more. But I just remember liking Awakening a hell of a lot more than this. Perhaps it just hasn't been adapted in a way that has caught my eye. But it has been great to break it down with you guys, and I'm happy that we all got to chat occasionally, and you guys have been pretty forgiving as a whole. I have goofed up quite a bit on Noblesse and getting characters mixed up, but my only plea is, guys, there is a lot of character names being thrown at you occasionally, and sometimes it's just very, very quick, especially when the characters sometimes share a lot of similar traits. If I am messing up, it's not because I'm intentionally doing it, it's just a simple mess up. There is a lot going on. I think I've covered most things over my weekly breakdowns, and I think I've covered a few bits and pieces. So I hope you guys I wish you guys a happy 2021. Hopefully we all meet again in the future when I talk about other animes that maybe you are watching as well. I've got 4 different animes coming out next season to break down. I'm also working on my secret idea, which I think will be interesting as well, where I start honing in on more breaking down a certain character overall and just actually talking about via design, artwork, and just going at the breaking down a bit heavier. So that's an idea coming your way that I'm slowly working on, but it's taking a little bit more time than I thought it would. I look forward to seeing you guys again next year. Hopefully you guys have had a good one. Thank you guys so much for your continued support. It really does mean a lot. I'm not the best at breaking down animes yet. I'm intending to grow as a channel and hopefully get better and better at making these things more entertaining. So thank you guys so much. Have a good one. Bye bye.